After a long wait, Disney's new Snow White finally came out last week, and to put it mildly, my friends, this has been a colossal...
None of them remakes are any good.
Let's address the elephant in the room.
The movie is terrible anyway.
But why do you have to mess with a classic, especially with someone who doesn't even seem to like her own character?
But the problem is that Disney fundamentally isn't capable of making anything that is truly non-woke anymore.
Am I a psychopath?
And if you disagree with this sentiment, I don't need your business. Thanks.
You know what? Maybe Disney does.
You don't have to make men seem emasculated and puny to make women seem strong, and you don't have to eliminate them altogether, as this actress has actually suggested.
Are you having trouble paying your bills, Rachel?
When commentator Bretty Cooper roasts Rachel Zegler for her role in Disney's botched Snow White remake, especially after the film has tanked so badly, it's impossible not to pay attention. You've probably heard the saying, go woke, go broke, but rarely has it played out in such spectacular fashion as it did with this legendary fairy tale.
And new controversies surrounding the production, surrounding the actresses in the film are literally popping up every single day. They cannot outrun the curse.
Instead of enchanting audiences, the new Snow White stirred a whirlwind of backlash, proving that reimagining a beloved classic can be a double-edged sword if you're not careful. And at the center of this drama, Rachel Zegler herself, a once promising star who quickly became a lightning rod for controversy. But there's more to the story than just a box office disaster and a harsh critique from Bretty Cooper. How did we get to the point where a cherished 1937 animated masterpiece fell into disrepute after being modernized for today's audiences? Why did the actress celebrated for her vocal talent in West Side Story suddenly face public ire for calling the prince creepy and celebrating when the film obviously struggled? And, most importantly, does this fiasco signal a larger shift in how Hollywood tackles long-treasured tales? Before you brush this off as just another failed remake, stick around, because once you see the bigger picture behind Disney's downfall, you'll realize the stakes are higher than a single movie.
Has been absolutely horrifying. Like, I literally found myself feeling bad for them at times, that just shows you how terrible this has been. It is financially crumbling, financially failing. The reviews are genuinely horrible.
There's a massive debate unfolding about what audiences actually want, how actors should handle public commentary, and whether or not woke blockbusters have finally reached their breaking point. Let's dive in. Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs wasn't just another cartoon. When it premiered in 1937, it redefined what animation could accomplish and sealed its place as a groundbreaking cultural phenomenon. Audiences back then were awestruck by the lush visuals, the emotional storytelling, and the timeless theme of love prevailing over darkness. For decades, Snow White remained a revered piece of cinematic history, holding up as a testament to Disney's creative genius and the universal values woven into fairy tales: innocence, hope, kindness, and courage. Yet the secret to its enduring charm wasn't just top-notch animation. It was the story's deeper resonance, the relatable struggle of an innocent girl against envy and evil, the uplifting portrayal of friendship, and the heartwarming idea that love, yes, even the romantic kind, can lead to salvation. It was a simpler time, to be sure, but also a reflection of timeless human desires: connection, kindness, and a belief in happily ever after. This was the Snow White generations grew up adoring. But recently, the once untouchable legacy of this fairy tale classic faced a challenge nobody saw coming: a bold new adaptation that promised to modernize the story for contemporary audiences. Fans assumed that Disney would handle this update with care, mindful of the original's precious legacy. Instead, the adaptation's direction veered off in ways many felt disrespected the heart of the story.
Is there one reason why this actually flopped? Was it because of politics and wokeness? Was this another woke flop? Or was it simply just a terrible film that nobody wanted from the beginning? She is not Caucasian. She is a Latina. She is half Colombian. And so people were like, why were you cast in the first place? We just had a black Little Mermaid. Now we're having a Latina Snow White, and she is literally called Snow White. This doesn't make sense. So that was happening.
Clashes between nostalgia and modern sensibilities were inevitable. But few expected the tension to reach meltdown levels. And that's exactly what happened. Yet as much as people love the original, Disney's quest to reinvent old favorites has proven risky. Nowhere is that clearer than in how quickly the new Snow White project unraveled. The hype machine kicked into gear the moment Disney announced its decision to create a live-action version of Snow White. After all, the formula for these remakes had seen moderate to major success in the past, from Cinderella to Beauty and the Beast. So, naturally, everyone assumed this updated take would be a high-stakes retelling, packed with A-list performances, lavish sets, and Disney's usual knack for enchantment. At first, audiences seemed intrigued. They wondered if the classic dwarfs would return, and how the evil queen's villainy might look in a more realistic setting. But as details emerged, optimism gave way to growing unease. Rumors started circulating about significant rewrites of key plot elements. Whispers about removing or drastically altering the prince's role got people riled up.
So I know that we all want to talk about this Snow White, but I know that there is also another Snow White that I think you guys want me to talk about.
Even more concerning, talk of heavy-handed political overtones spread like wildfire across social media, raising eyebrows among fans who simply wanted to relive a cherished story. By the time early promotional materials trickled out, the online discourse had erupted into a full-blown controversy. People began asking, did Disney forget what made Snow White magical in the first place? The unraveling hit turbo speed once the film reached theaters. Far from making a triumphant debut, it faced fierce criticism over what many perceived as awkwardly inserted messages and a general disregard for the innocence central to the original film. Instead of the graceful, charming princess from 1937, viewers encountered a version of Snow White who, some argued, felt more like a lecture than a beloved fairy tale heroine. Box office returns told a tale of their own, an opening weekend that fell dismally short of expectations, prompting early whispers of a financial flop. Then came the precipitous drop in the following weeks. It was a disaster no one, not even the most skeptical Disney critic, thought could happen on such a grand scale. As the film's weaknesses came to light, one name kept surfacing in the midst of the backlash: Rachel Zegler, the actress tasked with embodying the new Snow White. Her journey from rising star to public enemy seems almost cinematic in itself. When news broke that Rachel Zegler had been cast as Snow White, many were thrilled.
Unfortunately, the only thing I can really say is that that is not my story to tell. Again, Rachel didn't even seem like she cared or liked the source material. I mean, that is just far from a graceful Disney princess-like promotion. It's far from what you would think Disney wants.
She was fresh off critical acclaim, applauded for her vocal talents and her potential to become a new face of Hollywood. With her youthful energy, it looked like she might be the perfect candidate to breathe new life into an iconic Disney role. Early interviews showed a bright, enthusiastic performer, grateful for the opportunity to tackle a beloved character. But a few missteps can derail an actor's public image in the blink of an eye. Not long after filming began, Zegler's remarks about the original fairy tale surfaced online. She referred to the 1937 prince as creepy and hinted that the story needed a massive overhaul to fit modern ideals. While some viewers were open to reinterpretation, many longtime Disney fans felt alienated. Where they saw innocence and romance, Zegler claimed to see problematic tropes. This alone might not have spelled doom. Actors often share their perspectives, but the real tipping point came when the film started bombing at the box office. Instead of showing concern about the tepid reception, Zegler posted celebratory reactions that many found dismissive and arrogant. Fueling the fire, clips circulated of her describing her frustrations with the project, from wearing the fairy tale costume to wanting better financial compensation. Suddenly, the once promising star found herself cast in an unfavorable light. Online forums lit up with comments calling her tone-deaf, especially given the box office implosion. Even worse, she became entangled in a swirl of criticism that suggested she didn't respect the legacy or the audience supporting the film.
You know, if you are somebody who, has a lot of publicity around you and your name's attached to a project, that means that you have a ton of control or a ton of intel, but usually that is not the case. Unless you are, Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively with all of their films, apparently.
And then, to add more heat, commentators like Bretty Cooper jumped into the fray, roasting Zegler's stance on everything from rewriting the prince's role to her demands for more money. This public barrage only reinforced the narrative that she was an out-of-touch actress mocking a classic and disregarding fan sentiment. In an era where social media is unforgiving, Zegler quickly went from a rising star to a cautionary tale, overshadowing the film itself. Even though Rachel Zegler became a focal point, the fiasco wasn't solely about one actress's comments. Disney's broader shift toward politically charged storytelling was also under serious scrutiny. For years, Disney has been on a quest to modernize its catalog of classic tales. Sometimes this has worked out just fine. But with each successive remake, critics and audiences alike started noticing a pattern, a heavier emphasis on social messaging that often overshadowed the fun, whimsical elements that made these stories timeless. While many support the idea of progress and representation, they draw the line at clumsy attempts to retrofit a fairy tale with overt political undertones. The frequent complaint became,
you don't get to dictate anything. You don't get to dictate if a film actually happens. You don't get to dictate when it is shot, how it is shot, if you can ever speak about it to the public. You are simply just there to show up and say your lines and look the way they want you to look.
Just give us a good story. But the criticism reached a boiling point when Snow White began crumbling at the box office. Industry insiders went on record saying that the film's dismal performance was a direct result of agenda-driven storytelling. Moviegoers who purchased tickets expected enchantment, not a protracted lecture. Online conversations exploded with that now familiar phrase, "Go woke, go broke." The argument was simple. When studios invest more energy in political statements than in entertaining scripts, they risk massive financial losses. This isn't just idle chatter among fans. Experts are pointing out a real economic trend: repeated box office bombs for films perceived to be pushing narrow narratives. Executives at Disney and beyond are reportedly reconsidering their greenlighting strategies. The fiasco surrounding Snow White has become a cautionary tale, stoking fears that the pursuit of social commentary could overshadow the bedrock of good storytelling. If budgets keep climbing but mainstream audiences stay home, something's got to change. And fast. And that brings us to the rumored fallout, the possibility of actors being blacklisted, and the entire industry facing an overhaul in how it handles public discourse. As the film tanked, Hollywood's rumor mill kicked into high gear regarding Rachel Zegler's future.
Kind of seems like maybe this path that I'm taking right now is the path that Rachel Zegler should have taken instead of just running her mouth for the last 3 years, which we are going to get into now.
Some insiders claim her outspoken stance and combative public persona made her radioactive to major studios. The reasoning, they say, is purely financial. Why risk hundreds of millions of dollars on a production when your star might alienate the core audience with controversial remarks? To be clear, blacklisting in Hollywood is usually whispered about rather than confirmed. But various entertainment pundits suggested that, behind closed doors, certain power players might be advising each other to tread carefully before casting Zegler. Agents and managers are well aware of how quickly a controversial image can sink a big-budget film. When that controversy directly translates to poor box office earnings, studios tend to remember. This kind of career setback can happen to even the biggest names if they lose the public's trust. And in modern times, social media can amplify a star's missteps at warp speed. Zegler's supporters argue she's simply expressing her truth, that she isn't malicious. Yet, for every voice defending her, there seem to be others condemning her for disrespecting a beloved classic and doubling down when criticism mounted. Now, the question is, will she rebound from this or remain an industry pariah? Time will tell. The debacle raises broader questions for the entire entertainment world.
This has been going on since 2022, since September of 2022. That is when this all first exploded.
Is there a shift happening in audience preferences? And could Snow White be the tipping point that pushes Hollywood away from heavy-handed messages? If there's one thing the Snow White meltdown has proven, it's that viewers aren't shy about where they spend their money. Films that prioritize character-driven plots and universal themes, like action-packed thrillers or lighthearted comedies, are thriving, while agenda-focused projects often flounder. Even general audiences, not typically involved in heated political discourse, are voting with their wallets against what they perceive as preachy storytelling. Many see Snow White's failure as the ultimate cautionary tale. If you tamper too forcefully with a beloved narrative in service of political aims, you risk alienating both longtime fans and curious newcomers. More telling, though, is that the meltdown didn't occur in isolation. In the past few years, multiple big-budget films with strong political undertones have stumbled at the box office, prompting insiders to wonder whether the era of overtly woke blockbusters is coming to an end.
Rachel Zegler, her comments first exploded on the scene about Snow White back at the Disney D23 Expo. The clips went viral of her saying, "Snow White doesn't need a man, she's not going to fall for the prince." I've forgotten those clips. This is what I'm referring to.
No longer 1937.
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can.
Meanwhile, simpler crowd pleasers continue to draw audiences in droves. Just take a look at recent box office winners. Films with high-octane action sequences or purely comedic plots. These titles remind executives that many people head to the movies for an escape, not a lecture. The pivot away from forced messaging could mark a serious cultural shift, potentially restructuring how studios approach everything from casting choices to final edits. For Disney, the road ahead is tricky. The brand's identity is on the line, and it needs to decide whether to stay the course or learn from this fiasco and steer in a new direction. As the dust begins to settle on what many are calling one of Disney's most significant misfires, a few key points stand out. First, beloved stories carry a certain responsibility. Fans want reimaginings to honor the core of the original, not dismantle it in favor of trendy messaging. Snow White reminded everyone that messing with a classic can spark intense backlash, especially when the changes feel disrespectful to what made the story magical in the first place. Second, the drama surrounding Rachel Zegler's comments has exposed a deeper tension in Hollywood, the risk of tying massive budgets to actors who might alienate the audience. One social media post or dismissive interview can overshadow months of hard work from an entire production team. Studios are starting to see that letting cast members freely air unfiltered views on hot-button issues might be too big a gamble. Reports suggest they're exploring tighter clauses in contracts, limiting how far an actor can go when discussing politics or criticizing the material. Finally, there's the question of how this fiasco impacts Disney's larger strategy. The corporation has long been a powerhouse, churning out globally successful entertainment. But between the shaky performance of several recent live-action remakes and the resounding crash of Snow White, it may be time to reevaluate. Will Disney double down on their current path, or recalibrate by emphasizing universal storytelling with minimal political baggage? Only time will tell.
Maybe I could be president one day. I hate that. I just want to be president. That screams Disney princess. Oh my God, I'm literally getting enraged. Once again, I feel like I'm back in 2022. Yeah, the entire film's about a love story. Because that's what the point of the film is. And I'm sorry that chivalry in a man pursuing you is now deemed as stalking.
For now, one thing remains certain. The conversation ignited by Bretty Cooper's viral roast of Rachel Zegler isn't just about one actress or one movie. It's a debate about where entertainment as a whole is heading. Are we on the cusp of a new era that returns to timeless tales without divisive spin, or will these controversies become the norm for big-budget films? The stage is set for major changes, and the world will be watching how Disney and its counterparts respond. Stay tuned, because if Snow White was just the opening act, the real showdown in Hollywood might still be on the horizon.